The Heart of the Hills by John Fox Jr., Chapter 16. The boy was curled up on the rear seat of the smoking car. His face was upturned to the glare of the light above him. The train jerked, bumped, jerked, again swayed. Smoke and dust rolled in at the open window, and cinders stung his face, but he slept as peacefully as though he were in one of the huge feather beds at his grandfather's house. Slept until the conductor shook him by the shoulder. When he opened his eyes, grunted, and closed them again. The train stopped. A brakeman yanked him roughly to his feet, put a cheap suitcase into his hand, and pushed him, still dazed, into the chill morning air. The train rumbled on and left him blinking into a lantern held up to his face, but he did not look promising as a hotel guest, and the porter turned abruptly. And the boy yawned long and deeply with his arms stretched above his head, dropped on the frosty bars of a baggage truck, and rose again shivering. Cocks were crowing. Light was showing in the east, the sea of mist that he well knew was about him. But no mountains loomed above it, and St. Hilda's prize pupil, Jason Hahn, woke sharply at last with a tingling that went from head to foot. Once more he was in the land of the bluegrass. His journey was almost over, and in a few hours he would put his confident feet on a new level and march on upward. Gradually, as the lad paced the platform, the mist thinned and the outlines of things came out. A mysterious dark bulk high in the air showed as a water tank. Roofs new to the mountain eyes jutted upward. Trees softly emerged. A desolate, dusty street opened before him, and the cocks crowed on lustily all around him from farmhouses far away. The crowing made him hungry, and he went to the light of a little eating house and asked the price of the things he saw on the counter there, but the price was too high. He shook his head and went out, but his pangs were so keen that he went back for a cup of coffee and a hard-boiled egg, and then he heard the coming thunder of this train. The sun was rising as he sped on through the breaking mist toward the bluegrass town that in pioneer days was known as the Athens of the West. In a few minutes, the train slackened in midair, and on a cloud of mist between jutting cliffs, it seemed, and the startled lad looking forward far down through it saw a winding yellow light, and he was rushing through autumn fields again before he realized that the yellow light was the Kentucky River surging down from the hills. Back up the stream surged his memories, making him faint with homesickness, for it was the last link that bound him to the mountains. But both home and hills were behind him now, and he shook himself sharply and lost himself again in the fields of grass and grain, the grazing stock and the fences, houses, and the barns that reeled past his window. Steve Hahn met him at the station with a rattle-trap buggy and stared at him long and hard. "I'd hardly knowed ye. You growed like a weed." "How's the folks?" asked Jason. "Stirring." Silently they rattled down the street, each side of which was lined with big wagons loaded with tobacco and covered with cotton cloth. There seemed to be hundreds of them. "Hell's a-comin' about that terbacker up here," said Steve. "Hell's a-comin' in the mountains if that robber up here at the Capitol steals the next election for governor," said Jason, and Steve looked up quickly and with some uneasiness. He himself had heard vaguely that somebody somewhere and in some way had robbed his own party of their rights and would go on robbing at the polls, but this new Jason seemed to know all about it, so Steve nodded wisely. "Yes, my feller." Through town they drove, and when they started out into the country, they met more wagons of tobacco coming in. "How's the folks in the mountains?" "About the same as usual," said the boy. "Grandpap's poorly. The war's over just now. Folks are busy making money. Uncle Arch is still taking up options. The railroads are coming up the river." The lad's face darkened. "And land's selling for 3 times as much as you sold me out for." Steve's face darkened too, but he was silent. "You found out yet who killed your daddy?" Jason's answer was short. "If I had, I wouldn't tell you." "You must be a pretty good shot by now." "I ain't shot a pistol off for 4 years," said the lad again shortly, and Steve stared. The older mountaineer wore store clothes, but so did Jason. He had gone to meet the boy self-assured and with the purpose of patronage and counsel, and he had met more assurance than his own and a calm air of superiority that was troubling to Steve's pride. The mother, always apologetic on account of the one great act of injustice she'd done her son, felt awe as she looked, and as her pride grew, she became abject. And the boy accepted the attitude of each as his just due. But on Mavis, the wave of his influence broke as on a rock. She was as much changed from the Mavis he had last seen as she was at that time from the little Mavis of the hills, and he felt her eyes searching him from head to foot, just as she had done that long ago time when he saw her first in the hunting field. He knew that now she was comparing him with even higher standards than she was then, and that now, as then, he was falling short, and he looked up suddenly and caught her eyes with a grim, confident little smile that made her shift her gaze confusedly. She moved nervously in her chair, and her cheeks began to burn. And Steve talked on volubly for him, while the mother threw in a timid homesick question to Jason now and then about something in the mountains. And Mavis kept still and looked at the boy no more. By and by the two women went to their work, and Jason followed Steve about the little place to look at the cow and a few pigs and at the garden and up over the hill to the tobacco patch that Steve was tending on shares with Colonel Pendleton. After dinner, Mavis disappeared, and the stepmother reckoned she had gone over to see Marjorie Pendleton. "She's allus a-going over there." And in the middle of the afternoon, the boy wandered aimlessly forth into the bluegrass fields. Spring green the fields were, and the woods, but scarcely touched by the blight of autumn, were gray as usual from the limestone turnpike, which, when he crossed it, was ankle-deep in dust. A cloud of yellow butterflies fluttered crazily before him in a sunlight that was hardly less golden. And when he climbed the fence, a rabbit leaped beneath him and darted into the patch of ironweeds. Instinctively, he leaped after it, crashing through the purple crowns, and as suddenly stopped at the foolishness of his pursuit when he'd left his pistol in the suitcase, and with another sharp memory of the rabbit hunt he had encountered when he made his first appearance in that land. Half unconsciously, then, his thoughts turned him through the woods and through a pasture toward the twin homes of the Pendletons, and on the top of the next hill he could see them on their wooded eminences, could even see the stile where he had had his last vision of Marjorie, and he dropped in the thick grass, looking long and hard and wondering. Around the corner of the yard fence, a servant appeared leading a prancing iron-gray horse. The front doors opened, a tall girl in black riding habit came swiftly down the walk, and in a moment later, the iron-gray was bearing her at a swift gallop toward the turnpike gate. As she disappeared over a green summit, his heart stood quite still. Could that tall woman be the little girl who, with a tear, a tremor of the voice, and a touch of a hand, had swerved him from the beaten path of a century? Well, Mavis had grown, and he himself had grown, and of course Marjorie too had grown. He began to wonder whether she would even recollect him, or would know him when he met her face to face, or would remember the promise that she'd asked and he had given, and if she would be pleased to know that he had kept it. In the passing years, the boy had actually lost sight of her as flesh and blood, for she had become enshrined among his dreams by night and his dreams by day. Among the visions his soul had seen when he had sat under the old circuit rider and heard pictured the glories of the blessed, when mortals should mingle with the shining hosts on high. And above even St. Hilda, on the very pinnacle of his newborn and ever-growing ambitions, Marjorie sat, enthroned and alone. Light was all he had remembered of her, the light of her eyes and of her hair. Yes, and that one touch of her hand. His heart turned to water at the thought of seeing her again, and his legs were trembling when he rose to start back through the fields. Another rabbit sprang from its bed in a tuft of grass, but he scarcely paid any heed to it. When he crossed the creek, a muskrat was leisurely swimming for its hole in the other bank, and he did not even pick up a stone to throw at it, but he walked on, dreaming through the woods. As he was about to emerge from them, he heard voices ahead of him, high-pitched and angry, and with the caution of his race, he slipped forward and stopped, listening. In a tobacco patch on the edge of the woods, Steve Hahn had stopped work and was leaning on the fence. Seated on it was one of the small farmers of the neighborhood. They were not quarreling, and the boy could hardly believe his ears. "I tell you, that feller, they're calling him the autocrat already. That feller will have 2 of his judges to your 1 at every election booth in the state. He'll steal every precinct, and he'll be a-settin' in the governor's chair as sure as you are standing here. I'm a Democrat, but I've been a half a Republican ever since this free silver foolishness came up, and I'm going to vote against him. Now, all you mountain people are Republicans, but you might as well all be Democrats. You hadn't got a chance on earth. What are you going to do about it?" Steve Hahn shook his head helplessly, but Jason saw his huge hand gripped his tobacco knife, and his own blood beat indignantly at the temples. The farmer threw one leg back over the fence. "There'll be hell to pay when the day comes," he said, and he strode away while the mountaineer leaned motionless on the fence with his grip on the knife unrelaxed. Noiselessly, the boy made his way through the edge of the woods, out under the brow of a hill, and went on his restless way up the bank of the creek, toward Steve's home. When he turned toward the turnpike, he found that he had passed the house a quarter of a mile, so he wheeled back down the creek. And where the mouth of the lane opened from the road, he dropped in a spot of sunlight on the crest of a little cliff, his legs weary, but his brain still tirelessly at work. These people of the bluegrass were not only robbing him and his people of their lands, but also of their political birthright as well. The fact that the farmer was on his side, but only helped make the boy know it was truth, and the resentments that were always burning like a bed of coals deep within him sprang into flames again. The shadows lengthened swiftly about him and closed over him, and then the air grew chill. Abruptly, he rose and stood rigid, for far up the lane and coming over a little hill, he saw the figure of a man leading a black horse, and by his side the figure of a woman, both visible for a moment before they disappeared behind the bushes that lined the lane. When they were visible again, Jason saw that they were a boy and a girl, and when they once more came into view at the bend of the lane and stopped, he saw that the girl with her face downcast was Mavis. While they stood, the boy suddenly put his arm around her, but she eluded him and fled to the fence. And with a laugh, he climbed on his horse and came down the lane. In a burning rage, Jason started to slide down the cliff and pull the intruder, whoever he was, from his horse. And then he saw Mavis going swiftly through the fields, turn and wave her hand. And that stopped him. He could not punish where there was apparently no offense. So with sullen eyes, he watched the mouth of the lane give up a tall lad on a black thoroughbred, his hat in his hand and his handsome face still laughing, and still turned for another glimpse of the girl. Another hand wave came from Mavis at the edge of the woods, and glowering, Jason stood in full view, unseen, and watched Gray Pendleton go thundering past him down the road. Mavis had not gone to see Marjorie. She had sneaked away to meet Gray. His lips curled contemptuously. Mavis was a sneak, and so was Gray Pendleton. Then a thought struck him. Why was Mavis behaving like a brush girl this way, and why didn't Gray go to see her in her own home, open and above board like a man? The curl of the boy's lips settled into a straight, grim line, and once more he turned slowly down the stream that he might approach Steve's house from another direction. Half an hour later, when he climbed the turnpike fence, he heard the gallop of iron-shod feet, and he saw bearing down on him an iron-gray horse. It was Marjorie. He knew her from afar. He gripped the rail beneath him with both hands, and his heart seemed almost to stop. She was looking him full in the face now, and then with a nod and a smile that she would have given to a beggar or a tramp, she swept by him. End of chapter.